Trying to create t-shirt designs as a beginner can be extremely overwhelming. Well, I created this video to make it a whole lot easier for you. So today I'll be covering my top 9 tips and tricks and rules to follow when creating designs for graphic apparel like t-shirts. And by following these rules and tips, it should make your designing process a whole lot quicker and simpler. Tip number 1, minimize your colors. In fact, if you can, stick to one color. Most of my designs, I'd say at least 95% of them, are just black or white or just one flat color. If you start going through a lot of bestsellers on Etsy, you're gonna notice many of them just use one color. Like this one here just uses a blue. This one here just uses a flat white. We have this one here, again, just one color. But if you absolutely want to use color, make sure you're sticking to a few colors that all work together. So find a color palette and limit the amount of colors you're offering. If you're just selecting a whole bunch of colors that do not mesh well together, the design is not going to look professional. So what you can do is actually look up color palettes on Google and you can find one that you like. So maybe you want to go with a more pastel-y looking vibe or a more, what's this one called? Technicolor. Or if you wanted to go more muted, we have this one here. If you wanted to go more purplies, you wanted to go more browns, you can find one and then you can copy it. So I'm gonna just copy this image and using whatever tool, you're able to do this on Canva, Kindle, Illustrator, you can use the eyedropper tool to select the colors in this photo. So in Kindle, I have my word here and I've brought in an image of the color palette that I would like to use. So what I can do is I can select each individual, I've had to separate it here, but each individual text, and under text color, I'm gonna hit this, which is called the eyedropper tool. And then I'm going to hover over the color I wanna change this to. And now it has changed to that color. And then I'm gonna go through the rest of these and use this color palette because we know these are all complementary colors that work together. And there you go. But again, if you don't want to do color, you absolutely do not have to. In fact, I find it easier to create with just one color. And I found a lot of my designs that have just one color do the best. But one thing you also need to keep in mind when adding color is considering the contrast against the t-shirts you are planning to use. So if you wanted to put this on a purple t-shirt, it might not work well because you have a light purple in here, which probably won't show up because when things are printed, they are not as vibrant as when you view them on the screen. So this design here would probably do best on a white shirt or a black shirt, but there are a few other colors that if you put this on, you might not read one of these letters. I had this issue once. I was printing a pinkish design on a sand sweatshirt and on screen it looked perfect, but one of the pinks were a little too light that when printed, you actually couldn't read it. So it looked like part of the design was missing. So you need to keep in mind what colors you're planning to offer and you need to have high contrast against that color. So again, another reason I design in black and white is because I'll just flip the color. So if I am creating a white shirt, I'm going to put the black design on it. But I'm also gonna create a white version of that exact same design so that that can print on the dark shirts. Because again, contrast is really important. If you have a design but people can't read what it says, your customers are going to be unhappy. And that leads into my next point, which is number 3, keep it simple. Not just with colors, but also with your design. Like this design here. I've had so many people tell me that they have put so much effort into creating this super complex design just to list it and nothing ever happened to it versus they spent a few minutes making a design simple like this one and this one was their bestseller. The problem that many newbies come in with is they are trying to over design when simple does really well on graphic shirts. For example, I see a lot of designs like this where people add in tons of text effects, they add in backgrounds, they have a really, really cool, but a little bit complicated design for the center. And really, this probably took them quite a bit of time, but it probably won't sell compared to something like this, which has the same type of message. It took 1/10 of the time to create, but it is a lot more effective. People buy graphic shirts to be able to either convey a message, a passion, a like that they have, an interest. And when things are over designed, that message is not coming through, and therefore the point of buying that shirt gets lost. So by keeping it simpler, the message is a lot clearer. Another example is this one here. It's extremely simple. It just has the words RN and someone's name in it. And it's got a stethoscope in it, but it doesn't have a big stethoscope. It doesn't have a bunch of florals. It's not complicated at all. But the message of it is extremely clear. The person who's wearing it is probably a proud registered nurse that wants people to know that. Over designing also risks running into this looking tacky. If you use certain imagery, people might not purchase because they don't want the tackiness. For me, I like really simple sweatshirts and t-shirts. Usually for mine, I have just a text across the top or a text in the corner or a small text in the front. Oh, and maybe little elements that complement the design, but I'm never really focused around an over dramatic center element with text. Usually the text is my focus. You also have to keep in mind that the more effects you add to a design, if you have a bunch of text effects, if you have a glow around it, if you have a gradient, if you have a fade, these probably won't print as well as they look on screen, which now you might get some complaints from people because what you showed them on your image is not how it actually appears. And by keeping your design simpler, you aren't risking having a lot of these quality issues. Here's another example of a bestseller that's extremely simple. It probably took them 2 minutes to put together, but the comedy behind it shines through. It's a funny fishing shirt. It's not confusing at all. The humor shines through and it's not overwhelmed by different elements and colors and text effects. So keep it simple. The next important lesson is typography and your font choice. Your font choice is extremely important to if a design does well. This shirt is a fishing shirt. If you had this in a beautiful script and florally text, it might not do as well. And same with colors, minimize the amount of fonts that you have in a design. I've seen some designs where it's very text heavy and then they have so many different fonts that just make it look not professional. Versus I would say stick to maximum 2 different fonts. 1 if possible. And I would only ever be using a second font as an accent font. So maybe something that went underneath Cranky that had their name in a different font. Or like this one here, which uses 2 different fonts. If they had another font above chicken that maybe said Proud Chicken Mama, but it used another font, I think this design would risk being a failure now. Versus they could add another word if they still use one of these other 2 fonts that they had already selected to keep the harmony in place in their design. And fonts that complement each other are extremely important. Like these 2 in here, I do not think work together. They're very heavily weighted. They both give off like a different feel. I don't find this wildflower on the top really gives off the aesthetic of the message that I'm trying to convey with this shirt. So I'm probably going to either change one of these or honestly, I'd probably change both of these to something that look a little bit more professional. And depending on your niche, this is going to change. If you have a very girly design, maybe script fonts do really well. Maybe if you were doing, again, a fishing or more maybe a men's shirt, more block. But there is a way to find out what fonts are popular in other niches. If you do not yet have an eye for typography and fonts that complement each other, then search up your niche or a similar niche and start studying what type of fonts are doing well here. So I can see a lot of people here are using a script font and then they're using what's called a sans serif font, meaning it doesn't have the little edges for a lot of them. It just kind of is a flat line, EST 2024. And if you really like a design and you can't find the font, what you can do is just save a screenshot. So I'm gonna take a screenshot of, say for example, the mama here. Then on Google, look up what the font, and it's under my fonts, but it comes up under what the font. And then you can upload your photo and we're gonna hit identify font. So it's gonna pick up font from your photo and try to tell you what font this is. So we can scroll down here and see if we can find any similar ones. And then from here, we're able to sometimes get this font, or a lot of the times they're available on a tool called Creative Fabrica. So for example, I found this one, which it's picking it up. I don't think it's finding this exact font, but this one's picking up as Mokashin regular. There are pages you can go through so you can find one. Sometimes you'll find the exact one. Sometimes you'll find one that's really similar. And then coming on over to Creative Fabrica, and then I actually look up Mokashin. We have this font here. So I can actually download this. I do pay. It's a month-to-month fee. You can get 10 free downloads in the link in my bio down below. But you can find a bunch of fonts. Usually most of them that you're gonna find on Etsy are from Creative Fabrica. And if you don't like any of these, then you can just go through their different fonts, and we can go through a lot of script fonts, which are popular. And you're probably gonna find some that are pretty similar to ones that you are seeing on Etsy. The next thing you need to keep in mind is your weighting. And I find that when you're adding a lot of angles and you're adding a lot of rotation to your design, you risk losing the balance of your design. So we have this one here, and the top is not straight. And I find when the top's not straight, placement on a design gets really hard. And when you don't have symmetry, so one side is a lot heavier, then your design and your focus just goes off. So if we take a look at this first one here and try to look at it on a shirt, and from Kindle, I can just go to mockup, and then I'm going to go down to a shirt here, and then you can just select a random one. And then seeing how this looks, when it's actually on a shirt, the fact that it's not lined up, I think makes this design look a little off. And it's hard to find the center of the shirt as well. Because the weighting is off, it's also hard to tell, or things might not look like they're centered even though they are. Versus if we have this version right here, I'm gonna click on this one and again, go to mockup. I find this one looks a lot more cohesive. It looks balanced. It was easy to line up with the collar because there's nothing throwing off the symmetry and making it just look a little bit weird to the eye. I found this shirt here, and this kind of shows the non-symmetry, and I think this design would look a lot better if this feather was straight, or if it was straight across the top, because the fact that now, because it's angled, is just making it look unbalanced. Same with this design right here. Because one side is heavier with the focus, it kind of unbalances the shirt. So instead, what I would have done was put the text at the top and then put the little icon of the jar of flowers probably underneath, or I would have added a curve and had it at the top and then have a little bit of text at the bottom, but I would just make it more symmetrical on the shirt. The next one is about readability. How fast can someone actually read what's on your shirt? This first version here has so much text, so much conflicting text. It's hard to tell exactly what the message is, which part to read, and no one's there staring at your shirt trying to read it. They're quickly glancing over you. So you don't want to have a heavily text-focused design that people actually can't read. Again, this one's using a bunch of different fonts. I can't really read the wild. The readability is not good. Someone's blocking it. And again, there's just so much different text on here. Versus the second version, again, much quicker to make, but is much simpler, and I can read what this says in 2 seconds. So I think this version will probably sell a whole lot better than this first overcomplicated and hard to read shirt. This is especially true on Etsy. People on Etsy are shopping based off of your thumbnail photo, and their thumbnail photo is tiny when someone's actually on the search page. So if they come across your listing and your design has so much heavy text, which is extra small in the thumbnail, they're not going to be able to read it. The readability is extremely hard, versus the simpler you keep it, the larger the font, the more likely they're actually going to click because they know what this shirt is about from first glance. The next rule for designing for graphic shirts is use vector images and not raster. If you take a look at this image here, you might notice that you don't really see images on shirts that much. Maybe you will if someone gives you a custom image and you're doing customized photo items, but usually even on shirts, these aren't that popular and people will cut out the background. So if you have, say, example, a puppy that's running on a field, you'd use the background remover to cut out the background and have that little image. You don't want boxy images in your design. So either use a background remover to cut out things, or just start with vector images like this one here. It makes the design look a whole lot more professional, and it's again just something that appeals to people who are buying graphic designs more. And when you're saving your image, also don't forget to remove the background. So save all your images as PNG files and remove any white background images. Removing backgrounds is really easy nowadays. Canva has a really easy background remover. So does Kittl here. All you have to do is when you have images that have a background, to make this a better graphic design, is use a background remover to pull out the element to be its own separate element. It'll just match the vibe a whole lot better. And my last tip is always do your research before designing. So many people start with templates and start with crazy designs. Again, not following any of these rules. And usually just by having started with research first, you'll bypass a lot of these and realize what's doing well, especially because again, different scripts can do well in different niches, different fonts. Some niches actually might like a little bit more complicated designs, while others just have simple designs that sell. Take lawyer shirts, for example. If I look up lawyer shirts, I'm gonna see a lot of really funny text is doing well. Things like, I'm bailing you for this conversation, allegedly, I don't need a good lawyer, I raised one, objection. I don't see much graphics at all in this niche. Usually it's just text. I don't need a good lawyer, I raised one in my lawyer era, born to argue. We have this one that does have a little icon, but just keep in mind that maybe in this niche, text-based designs do a lot better. And in many cases, text designs do really well, but things like a gardening shirt is different. If you look up things like gardening shirt, actually the things that are our bestseller do have icons. They do have a little bit more to the design. They use a lot of usually icons. We have a lot of florals in here like this. So it is very important to find out what is popular in your niche first, but all of these previous tips and rules that we just explained will follow through to every single one. It's just preferences by niche. I hope this helped and made you realize that you don't need to spend as much time as designing as you think, because simple really does work. And if you did learn anything new, I do ask if you could please drop a like and subscribe. It would help so much. Thank you guys.